Okay, I just started this game. I'm trying to level up my first character, and I have some questions about good beginner builds.
Why are you asking this? If you need a guide, you're not cut out for this game.
I'm just trying to learn. I thought the community would help new players.
Community? You mean we're supposed to do your homework for you? Back when I started, we didn't have guides. We figured it out.
Okay, but guides exist now. So,
Exactly. Use the guides. Don't ask us. You're not worthy of our knowledge anyway.
that's pretty hostile. I'm just trying to learn the game.
Learn the game? You mean the game that's been out for 15 years? You're 15 years late. Everyone else had to earn their knowledge the hard way.
So newer players should be punished because you had a harder learning curve?
It's called paying your dues. You don't get to skip to the end just because someone wrote a guide.
This is why the community is dying. Everyone wants everything handed to them. Back in my day, we actually had to work.
I'm literally asking for help, and you're all attacking me for being new. This is crazy.
Not attacking. Just explaining that you don't belong here yet. Come back when you've earned your place.
Yeah, maybe go play a casual game if you need everything explained.
Good. Another tourist gone. This is what the game needs. Less hand-holding, more actual community standards.
Welcome back to MMO Madness Behind the Troll Mask. I'm Boss Mode, and today we're talking about gatekeeping. When veterans decide that newer players, different play styles, and different ways of experiencing content are somehow wrong and don't deserve respect. We're talking about the guards at the gates of communities, the people who think being exclusive is tradition, and the weird psychology of building identity on being exclusive. Let's explore how gatekeeping makes communities worse and why gatekeepers think they're protecting something worth protecting. Let me start by being clear about what gatekeeping actually is, because not all gatekeeping is the same, and understanding the differences matter. Gatekeeping is when someone with access to something uses that access to prevent others from getting it. The gate isn't physical, it's social. It's, I got here the hard way, so you should have to do so as well. It's, I have knowledge and I'm choosing not to share it. It's also, you're not the right kind of player, so you don't belong here. The interesting thing about gatekeeping is that it has legitimate origins. Some communities need standards to maintain function. A raid group needs people who understand mechanics. A roleplay community needs people committed to staying in character. There's a real version of you need to meet these standards to participate. But that's not gatekeeping, that's standards. Gatekeeping is when those standards become exclusionary for the sake of exclusion, when the goal isn't maintaining quality but preventing access. Here's the distinction. Legitimate standards, if you want to raid, you need to know the mechanics. Gatekeeping, if you need someone to explain mechanics, you don't deserve to raid. One is about standards, one is about exclusion. Gatekeeping also assumes that there's a correct way to experience content. The right way to do this quest is to figure it out yourself. The right way to raid is to learn through failure. The right way to level is without guides. None of these are correct, their personal preferences being weaponized as universal truths. Some gatekeeping comes from genuine concern about community health. Veterans worry that if the game becomes too accessible, it will lose what made it special. If everyone can get the best gear, gear becomes meaningless. If everyone can see the optimal build, optimization becomes pointless. There's a real concern underneath some gatekeeping. But a lot of the gatekeeping is just about identity. For some players, their value comes from having knowledge others don't have. Being an expert at something obscure gives them status. If everyone had access to that knowledge, they'd lose their status. So they gatekeep the knowledge to maintain their special position. The psychology is interesting. Gatekeeping creates an in-group and an out-group, veterans and newcomers, hardcore and casual, the right kind of player and the wrong kind. Once you identify as a part of the in-group, gatekeeping makes sense. You're protecting your group from outsiders. Gatekeeping also comes from nostalgia. The game was better when is often the code for the game was better when the community was more exclusive. Veterans remember when the community was smaller and tighter. They felt special, being a part of something select. Now the game is accessible and less exclusive, and they resent it. Some gatekeeping is about protecting scarcity. If someone could get endgame gear easily, your endgame gear wouldn't be impressive. If everyone could learn the optimal strategy, knowing the optimal strategy wouldn't be special. Gatekeeping maintains artificial scarcity. I have this knowledge and you can't easily get it because I'm not sharing. The worst gatekeeping is when it's used as control. Someone gatekeeps knowledge to maintain power over others. They're the only person who knows the answer, so people have to come to them. That gives them status and control. If everyone had access to that knowledge, they'd lose their leverage. Now let me tell you about what gatekeeping actually looks like when it happens, because gatekeeping isn't just annoying. It actively damages communities and drives people away. RuneScape has a rich history of complex quests with intricate puzzle solutions. One veteran player, let's call them Gatekeeper, had been playing since the beginning. They'd solved all the quests organically, figuring out solutions through trial and error. When guides started becoming available online, Gatekeeper was upset. They saw guides as cheating because they hadn't had guides available when they learned. They started refusing to help new players with quests, saying figure it out like I did. But more than that, Gatekeeper would mock players who used guides. In World Chat, they'd make fun of people asking for help. Oh, you used a guide? You didn't actually solve it. They created a whole narrative where using guides meant you weren't a real player. New players got intimidated. They felt like they had to hide using guides or be judged by veterans. The community became less welcoming because Gatekeeper had made it unsafe to admit you needed help. Eventually, Gatekeeper became known as difficult. Guilds would remove them because they were driving away new members, but Gatekeeper didn't see themselves as the problem. They saw themselves as maintaining standards while everyone else became casual. The irony is that RuneScape thrived when it became more accessible. Newer players who learned through guides became long-term players. The community grew. But gatekeepers like this one resented that growth. A World of Warcraft player had been raiding since vanilla. They'd learned everything through theory crafting and experimentation. When optimization guides became common, they saw them as a threat to the purity of raiding. This player would go into raid groups with optimizers and mock them constantly. Oh, you followed a guide? You didn't actually learn your class. Optimization guides are for people without skill. They'd refuse to work with people who use guides. The weird part is they'd get angry when the people using guides outperform them. They'd see someone with better DPS and assume it was because of the guide, not because that person was actually skilled. The guide became an excuse for why they weren't performing as well. Other raiders eventually avoided this person because they were exhausting. You couldn't ask them questions, you couldn't mention guides, you couldn't talk about optimization theory. They treated it all like hearsay. The raider quit the game eventually, claiming everyone has become casual and the community doesn't have standards anymore. But the community had standards. The standards just allowed for guides and optimization. That wasn't a community problem, that was their personal problem. Final Fantasy XIV has a strong roleplay community. One longtime role player decided they were the guardian of the correct roleplay. They created an entire manifesto about what was acceptable roleplay and what wasn't. They'd attend roleplay events and critique people's characters, their speech patterns, their character development. They'd tell people they were doing it all wrong. They had very specific ideas about what constituted good roleplay, and everything else was invalid. If someone did character development differently, Gatekeeper would explain that wasn't how character development worked. If someone used casual speech, Gatekeeper would mock them for breaking immersion. They'd turn roleplay from creative expression into meet my specific standards. The roleplay community eventually excluded this person because they were stifling creativity. New role players were afraid to try things because they might be critiqued by the self-appointed roleplay police. Existing role players stopped taking risks because they knew they'd get judged. What's interesting is Gatekeeper genuinely thought they were protecting roleplay quality. They saw themselves as a guardian of standards. They didn't realize they were just making people afraid to participate. A guild in a PvE-focused MMO had been around for years. Most members were casual. They played when they could. They weren't pushing cutting-edge content. They just wanted to have fun. Then some hardcore players joined. These players wanted to push difficult content, optimize builds, and run specific strategies. They weren't wrong to want that. The guild had the capacity for challenging content. But the hardcore players started gatekeeping the experience. They mocked casual players for not knowing mechanics. They said casual players dragged down the guild. They created a divide. Real players hardcore and tourists were casual. The casual players who had been in the guild for years started feeling unwelcome. They'd been enjoying the guild fine until hardcore players decided they weren't the right kind of member. Eventually the guild split. Casual players left and found a guild that valued them. Hardcore players, well, they focused on harder content. But it didn't have to happen. The guild could have accommodated both playstyles. The gatekeeping created the split that didn't need to exist. This is about a guild leader who had been playing longer than everyone else. They were the guild master and they decided to gatekeep all strategic knowledge. They wouldn't share optimal builds. They wouldn't explain mechanics in detail. They wanted people to figure things out for themselves. The guild leader's justification was, we need people who care enough to learn. But what's actually happening was guild members couldn't progress without the guild leader's knowledge. They were dependent on the GM. Other officers noticed the pattern. When someone asked a question, the GM would give cryptic answers or none at all. When someone figured something out independently, the GM would say they've done it wrong. The GM had created a monopoly on knowledge to maintain control. Eventually, an officer documented this pattern and removed the GM, but it took an internal coup. The GM was gatekeeping so effectively that normal feedback wasn't working. A popular streamer was known for speedrunning early access games. They'd learn mechanics quickly and share strategies, but they had strong opinions about correct ways to play. If viewers tried different strategies, the streamer would mock them. Why would you do it that way? That's inefficient. They'd gatekeep the right strategy and made people feel stupid for trying alternatives. New players watching the stream would learn that there was one correct way to play and all the other ways were wrong. The streamer had created a culture of gatekeeping around strategy. When the streamer got called out for gatekeeping, they claimed they were just sharing the optimal way, but optimal for speedrunning isn't optimal for casual play. The streamer was weaponizing one approach as universal truth. Here's what I really want to explore: why people gatekeep. Because it's not random. There's a psychological underpinning to gatekeeping behavior. For a lot of gatekeepers, their identity is built on being exclusive. They are the expert. They are the veteran. And they are the one who knows. If everyone had access to that knowledge, they'd lose their identity. This is especially true for people who don't have much going on outside of gaming. If their entire sense of self-worth comes from being good at a game, then everyone else getting good at that game threatens their identity. Gatekeeping protects your self-worth by preventing others from accessing what makes you special. Some gatekeepers are genuinely nostalgic for a simpler time. Games used to be harder. Communities used to be smaller. There was a sense of achievement in figuring things out. When games became more accessible, gatekeepers feel like something was stolen from them. They didn't get to experience the true version because now everyone can. There's also the weird sense of entitlement. I suffered, so you should suffer too. The bootstrap mentality. I learned this the hard way, so you should have to as well. It's not about maintaining standards, it's about making sure everyone pays the same price. Some gatekeeping comes from the genuine concern about community dilution. If everyone can access everything easily, what makes being a part of the community special? If everyone's an expert, being an expert means nothing. Gatekeeping maintains artificial scarcity of expertise. The in-group or the out-group psychology is powerful. Once you identify as part of the real community, gatekeeping makes sense. You're protecting your group from outsiders, us versus them, the right kind of player versus the wrong kind. Some people gatekeep because they have low self-worth and they finally found something they're good at. Being gatekeepy makes them feel powerful. Telling someone they don't belong gives them a sense of control. This is especially true for people who feel powerless in real life. What's important to understand is that gatekeeping isn't actually about maintaining community standards in most cases. It's about maintaining status and identity. A truly secure person with secure status wouldn't need to gatekeep. They'd be confident enough to share what they know. The communities that thrive are ones where veterans help newer players, where experienced people share knowledge, and where different playstyles are respected. Those communities grow and sustain themselves. Gatekeeping communities shrink and eventually die. So what do we actually do about gatekeeping? How do we fight it as a new player, and how do you stop doing it if you realize you're gatekeeping? If you're being gatekept, the first thing is understanding that it says nothing about your legitimacy. A gatekeeper saying you don't belong doesn't mean you don't belong. It means they have a problem with sharing. Don't internalize their gatekeeping. Find communities that aren't gatekeepy. Most games have at least some guilds or group that are actively welcome to new players and are happy to help. Gatekeepers are loud, but they're not the majority. Find your people. Also be aware that asking for help is fine. You don't have to figure everything out yourself. Using guides is fine. Learning from veterans who actually want to teach is fine. Gatekeepers will judge you, but gatekeepers judge people regardless. You're not doing anything wrong by asking for help. For communities trying to fight gatekeeping, implement explicit values against it. We welcome new players. We help each other learn. Different play styles are valid. Make it clear that gatekeeping isn't tolerated. Have actual consequences if someone is being gatekeepy. Recruit veterans who remember what it was like to be new. People who are secure in their expertise and willing to share it. Build a culture where helping is valued. Make gatekeeping socially unacceptable in your space. If you realize you're gatekeeping, ask yourself why. Is it actually about community standards, or is it about your identity and status? Most of the time, it's the latter. If that's true, you might need to do some internal work around your self-worth that isn't tied to gatekeeping knowledge. Being a good veteran isn't about making others feel inferior. It's about sharing what you know and helping people grow. That's actually way more valuable and way more fulfilling than gatekeeping. Some of the best gaming communities are one where veterans are generous with knowledge and new players feel welcome. Those communities grow. They sustain themselves. They're healthy. That's the actual standard worth maintaining. Gatekeeping is about protecting identity, not protecting community. Real communities don't need gates. They need welcoming. If you're a gatekeeper, understand you're not protecting something worth protecting. You're just making the community worse and yourself feel temporarily powerful. That's not worth it. And if you're being gatekept, remember that gatekeepers are insecure. They wouldn't need to gatekeep if they were actually secure in their position. Your belonging doesn't depend on their approval. The best gaming communities are ones where people help each other, where veterans guide newcomers, where expertise is shared freely. Those communities thrive. Gatekeeping communities die. Choose wisely about which one you build. Next week on MMO Madness, we're diving into fashion police, the cosmetic wars. We're talking about people who judge how others dress their characters, drama over transmog choices, and why some people take cosmetics way too seriously. That one's gonna be fun. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and support the podcast. And if you've been gatekept or caught yourself gatekeeping, email us at podcast@mmomadness.com. Until then, share your knowledge freely, welcome new players, and remember, gatekeeping is a sign of insecurity, not authority. I'm Boss Mode, and thanks for listening.